So for this Sandbox episode, we're excited to talk to somebody whose work we've been admiring for a very long time. If you're listening to the show or watching the show, chances are you know who he is. At least you're familiar with his work. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the contemporary legend himself, artist and illustrator Jason Edmiston, to the show.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Why do you blush a little? Like you started to blush. You knew I was going to say all that, but like all of a sudden, now that it's real, you get very red.
It's very flattering. What can I say? It's just my pallor. All the blood shows through.
I see how that works. Man, thank you for coming on the show. I know it's been a busy time for you, and we'll get to all that stuff. But before we jump into all of that, why don't you give everybody out there a little bit of a Wikipedia page as to who you are and what you do?
Well, yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I've been listening quite a bit in the last year, so I'm thrilled to be on. My name is Jason Edmiston. I am a working illustrator, fine artist, commercial artist, whatever you want to call it. I'm living in Toronto, and I guess you may know me best from companies like Mondo, NECA Toys, Fright Rags, different pop culture galleries and avenues across North America. But do you want to know from like the beginning, like where I started?
Sure. Yeah, maybe give us a little bit of a peek behind the man we know now and talk to us a little bit about what got you there.
Yeah, okay. Well, I actually live in the same city that I grew up in, about 10 minutes drive away from where I was born. It's kind of crazy, but I do travel a lot now. So I went to school in Toronto, and I went to art college at the Ontario College of Art and Design in downtown Toronto for 4 years. And I started working commercial jobs basically right out of college, but just for a lot of magazines and newspapers and kind of smaller commercial companies, ads for yogurt or labels for different flavored I don't know, olive oils and just kind of small consumer stuff. Nothing too major. And I kind of did that for a few years, and I was still working a part-time job, still living at home with my parents when I was in my early 20s for a few years until I could afford to kind of move out and kind of go on my own. And work just kind of built upon itself. Like I'd get more and more jobs based on previous work, and the jobs got bigger and bigger. And once I had a decent portfolio, I was able to get an artist representative, and that kind of began the first part of my career. Essentially, I ended up for the first 10 years of my career basically working for bigger ad agencies and properties, doing billboards and magazine covers for pretty well-known properties, but still kind of heavily Canadian themed. So, our
like
big
everything is maple leaves, you mean?
Yeah, well, actually, literally companies where I would have to draw, a Toronto Maple Leaf year, or Canadian magazines that whereas Canadian, as you would think, children's magazines that had
Mountie Monthly.
Yeah, that had like moose and beavers on the cover and stuff like that. Canadian hunting and fishing magazines, super Canadian themed stuff. But they had pretty well. They were pretty widely distributed, and they had decent budgets. And I even did the cover for this magazine, this national magazine in Canada called Maclean's, which is kind of like our Newsweek.
Oh, nice.
That was pretty high profile, and back in the days when they actually had decent cover budgets, before they started clear cutting all the advertising budgets.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was just kind of getting disillusioned with that career, and I wanted to get into the pop culture scene. So after about 8 or 9 years, I had started to do comic book conventions, doing a lot of pop culture themed art, showing up in Artist Alley, selling prints and fan art and stuff like that. And I would also go to San Diego Comic-Con and Chicago Comic-Con and New York. And on my own dime and literally travel around with my friends in a portfolio and try to show my work around to all the art directors trying to get comic cover work and toy, box art work and action figure packaging and all that stuff with my portfolio. And I finally started to get some nibbles with Hasbro. And some t-shirt companies, some horror t-shirt companies that I still work for, like Fright Rags. And I got a few kind of genre gigs here and there doing horror stuff that I'm kind of well known for, or superhero stuff, or Star Wars, or G.I. Joe, or, little by little, to the point where I knew I could kind of do it on my own because I was hustling to get these jobs on my own. So I actually left my agent, and then it began the second half of my career, which is the last 10 years of my career.
It sounds like slowly building over time. Like, it doesn't necessarily sound like there was just this moment where something clicked and now you've just like rocketed, towards where you are now. It sounds like you have been grinding for a while.
Yeah, it was a snail's pace. It was a rocket to the middle. It was it was really at a snail's pace for the first 10 years. I mean, it took forever to get anything going because, I'm a bit older than you guys, and the internet was not like it is now. Sure. And self-promotion was not like it is now. We would literally, when I was with my agent, we would literally have to make little booklets of our art and advertise in annuals that would physically be mailed to different companies, and they'd have to look through these books and like a source book and pick artists from these books, and then hopefully contact your agent, and they'd say, hey, we've got this job, this is the budget, blah blah blah. Oh, and by the way, we're going to take 30%. Right. And a lot of times, especially with working in Canada, I mean, these are Canadian dollars, they're not American dollars. So I mean, you're essentially working for smaller budgets in Canadian dollars, and 30% of that is taken off. So, I mean, it's a real grind to kind of get any kind of momentum going, because you're really investing any kind of money that you make back into the business, and just enough to kind of survive, right?
So what does that do for you now? Like, so sitting where you are now, and we're about to jump in kind of more of probably the Jason that most people are familiar with, but what does that do for your attitude and perspective now that you're in this place of, again, a lot of influence and being really well known for this style art that you do? I imagine you have some appreciation for that grind. Is it something that you kind of like wish on other people, or is it something that you're
I would only wish it on them if I dislike them, I suppose, because it was really awful. Like, I wouldn't have wanted to do anything else. This is kind of the only thing I was ever good at, to do for a profession. And I can't imagine any other career, but I wouldn't have wanted to wish, that experience, that first experience on young artists, because it was so difficult. I mean, I see a lot of other, I call them my contemporaries, but they're 10 years younger than me, and they kind of they're at the same point in my career now, and they're there 10 years earlier. And I wish that kind of had happened with me. I mean, I think Gary Pullen, because we're the same age, I think he kind of has the same feeling on this, is that because we didn't have the same exposure with the internet, and pop culture boom wasn't what it is now, with Gallery 1988 and Spoke Art Gallery and Mondo, and that kind of came around in the last 10 years. So we had some practice built up. Yeah. So we had a running start by the time the pop culture boom, or the pop culture resurgence, or whatever you want to call it, happened. So we were in a good position because we were kind of already working professionally, and we knew how to work the deadlines, and we knew how to hustle. So I guess we were better prepared than maybe some of these younger guys, but it seemed like they were kind of handed their quicker than we were.
Sure. Well, I want to talk about that, because we've heard that from a couple people we've talked to over the years, other artists where they came from a different background, and that pop culture, they're in that now, but that's not where they started. I want to know, like, how did that change for you? How did you change your business, or change your craft, or change your marketing from coming from that more, I guess, analog
and moose?
Yeah. Like that more analog style, or like cold calling or pounding the pavement kind of idea, versus the internet where anybody can see you anywhere. So, like, how did that shift for you?
I'm very thankful for the internet and image sharing social media platforms. Like, I will go back further than Instagram. DeviantArt was huge for me because that was kind of what Instagram has now become for me. I don't go on DeviantArt anymore, but it was kind of the Instagram for artists. It was like Facebook for artists, I used to call it, because it was a great way to just post what you're working on and meet other creatives with similar tastes, and you could search by images, keywords, and I would actually even get jobs through DeviantArt just because it was a great way for other artists, other creatives to share their work, and you kind of get to know each other. I know a lot of guys on Facebook, guys and girls on Facebook now, and they're friends of mine, in real life, that I met way back in the DeviantArt days because they had a following, like Dan Luvisi or Serge Barreau, or Bobby Chu, these sort of guys that you might have run into because they had big DeviantArt followings, and it was like, oh, these guys are cool, and they've got a lot of people looking at their stuff, and they're interacting with their fans. Let's make friends and share ideas, and then that's now what Facebook and Instagram is for artists and sharing your work. But that was instrumental in people of my generation getting our work out to a mass audience without having to have agents, without having to send out mailers, without having to cold call, or even a lot of times physically go to conventions and take your portfolio around. I would go every November because they had American Illustration Awards, and sometimes I'd get awards for that publication. Yeah. And my wife and I would go in November for the awards annual party, and we'd literally take a portfolio around by foot and walk up and down Manhattan and go to Time Warner Building and go to Village Voice and knock on doors and
hitting the pavement like you are.
Absolutely, yeah, like a brush salesman in an old episode of Leave It to Beaver or something.
Sure.
Hello, man. May I interest you in this vacuum?
I drew.
But going from it's more leaving the beaver. Right? Because you're transitioning from Canada.
Yes, I see what you did there.
Patrick needed help with the explanation.
I'm still getting it.
I thought it was going sexual there for a minute, but no.
Never. I would never do something like that.
Nobody compares sexuality with Canadians.
No one would ever make that connection.
Well, never mind. I don't know what I was going to say. Go ahead.
I do have a question, though, because as I slide, let me start... Let me say a different word. As I scroll through your Instagram feed,
right?
And I've been following you for a while, but as I scroll through this, the advent of social media and image sharing and everything has been good for you, right? But it's also been good to you because I'm seeing all of these directors, actors. I mean, you got Tommy Wiseau in like the last 30 posts, right? Where he's sharing and liking your work. You've got Greg Nicotero from The Walking Dead, among other things. Right. You've got these incredibly well-known, talented people who are loving and liking and sharing your work. That's a world now, I would imagine, that without social media, you would never know who's buying your work. So what does that do for you as the artist in terms of drive, in terms of encouragement, in terms of, whatever? What does that do for you as the artist?
Well, I mean, it's very flattering as a bare minimum, because, I always wanted, you want people to see your work, but if you see other directors or actors or somebody that you admire their work, and they're enjoying it as well, it kind of it takes it to kind of another level where it's like, oh my God, this artwork got out further than my city. It's like not just my parents and my neighborhood, my neighbors and my friends like it, but these people in this other city, and even these famous people that I thought were on this crazy island, in a gold chair. You get my metaphor? It's kind of like these untouchable people that you never think you're going to run into, and they actually know your work. Sylvester Stallone's people wrote me to request one of my posters for his collection that he prompted, that it wasn't just like, okay, we're trying to get everything that everybody does related to this guy. It's like he asked for it, and he got his people to reach out. I was literally just not to name drop, but I was literally just tweeting with Elijah Wood today about my show.
So
Because he lives in Austin, and I know he follows Mondo, and hopefully one of these days he'll be able to make it out to one of my shows. But it's kind of cool that you run into these people that you like their work in their creative field. It's not painting and drawing, but it's creative, and they're artists themselves, musicians or whatever, and you're able to share your art with them as well. It's kind of, it's the same as running into, another, well-known poster artist that you like, and like, oh man, I like your work too. It's kind of validation, more than anything. So it's super flattering. It's validation. And above that, it allows your work to be spread much further, because these fans of those people will kind of take a second look at your work. You're like, because you've been validated in a small way.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, well, if it's cool enough for this guy, I'm going to go and follow his page. And then they forget why they followed your page after a while. They're just following it because they like it. Mm-hmm. And then you got a gallery show coming up, or if you got a print drop coming up, you're like, oh, they'll take a second look, and maybe you'll make a sale. Maybe you'll make another friend or follower or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's just networking. All it is networking, and it's free.
Yeah.
Above everything, it's free, right? Until Instagram, puts a clamp on it.
Yeah, eventually.
But
that's great. And it's not just the idea of, certainly, obviously, networking is great and important stuff like that. But I think just the attitude I'm hearing from you about how you go about it, and about how it just sounds like you just appreciate the fact that people want to connect with you. I think that mentality comes through in how you interact with people, and that's really, really important.
Yeah, so, I think it's exciting, and it's super rewarding. I did not have a rewarding experience with the first half of my career. I did it because I could do it. I was able to do it, and it made money, and I didn't have to get a real job. I worked out of my house, so that's a bonus. But it didn't make a lot of money. It wasn't very rewarding. Personally, the work wasn't really personally rewarding, because it was, fabric softener ads and ice cream containers. And it was just, who cares? Nobody hangs it on their wall. Right. So if it doesn't make, what's that thing Adam Carolla says? If it doesn't make you happy and it doesn't make you money, why are you doing it?
Yep. Sure.
Yeah.
I'm like, F this. I got to get out of this field. I got rid of my agent. I went out on my own. The same time that Gary left, around the same time that Gary Pullen left the magazine that he worked for many, many years, and went off on his own. And we're like, we need to do this. We're actually starting to build a following. We can do this on our own. We don't need to have an employer or somebody, a teat to be tethered to. I don't know if you can be tethered to a teat, but you get my mixed metaphor. We can do this on our own, and social media, and the internet, and places like, larger pop culture venues like Mondo and Gallery 1988, and, places that would share your work, they also helped greatly, because they have such a big fan base and they support their artists.
Totally. So let's move now into part 2. I think that's perfect. So now you decided, hey, I can make this move. Like, I can change. I can go after this. So what does part 2 look like for you?
Well, what you've been seeing the last, couple years of my career is essentially what it's been for the last 10 years. I mean, I met around the time that I met and Justin, both working at, Justin Erickson from Fam City Creative.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
2 other Toronto guys, actually, Justin still lives in Toronto, but Gary is now in Hamilton, in the same city that Matt Tobin is living in. So I kind of have this small group of creative friends that we hang out with a lot, and we have a lot of the same clients. So we met around 10 years ago, and at a comic show, actually in Toronto, at the Fan Expo, which is probably the biggest Canadian comic convention. And I knew that Gary had worked for Mondo on a Street Trash poster, I believe, and Justin Erickson was just starting to get some nibbles from Mondo, and I had heard about them kind of just through the grapevine, Facebook, and what's this cool Thing poster by this guy Tyler Stout.
Yeah.
This is when nobody knew what Mondo was really, and
Right.
just the hardcore guys knew.
Sure.
But I was an admirer of this new avant-garde kind of alternative poster scene, and I was also starting to be aware of Fright Rags, which is another big influence and client in my life. And Gary and Justin both worked for Fright Rags doing horror-themed T-shirts. So the three of us, this is before we met Matt, the three of us would have house parties together and hang out at conventions together. And we were talking more and more, and they were suggesting, oh, you should try to work for this company. Or I'm like, oh, hey, how do you get in with this company? We just kind of share our resources. Mm-hmm. And I started sending samples to Fright Rags. I don't remember the exact chain of events, but I think somebody that worked there had shared my work with Ben Scrivens from Fright Rags, who'd be a great guy that you guys should interview if you haven't yet.
Okay.
And I started working for them, doing some posters and some T-shirts. And Ben, I know it's a long story, it's kind of rambling, but Ben was friendly with Mitch from Mondo and had shown a Night of the Creeps versus Monster Squad poster that I did for Fright Rags to Mitch. And Mitch liked my work enough to show it to Rob.
Right.
And it just kind of snowballed into me working for them, eventually doing, I did a Maniac Cop 2 poster for them.
Yeah.
And that, turned into
The rest is history.
and then at the same time, 88 was around, and they actually had a required reading show, which is a classic literature themed group show that Mondo curated. And I was in that show and did a screen print. I did maybe my second screen print for that show. And then that got me into the gallery scene. Yeah. And it kind of all happened at the same time. But you see how kind of one job begets the other, and it just kept snowballing. Yeah. So basically, the career that I have now is made up of, a lot of horror T-shirts and licensed art for toy companies like NECA or Super 7, or I did some Walking Dead toys for McFarlane.
Yeah.
And movie posters for Mondo and gallery shows for Mondo. Pop culture gallery shows, which you guys are aware of, and then some other stuff that you never end up seeing, but it's still pop culture themed. Like I might do a poster for a marathon, like a rock and roll marathon or something in Arizona, but it might still have like a movie poster kind of vibe to it. Right. So it's still related to that scene, even though you guys, because you're following, the Pinterest stuff that's popular, Goonies and Gremlins and Ghostbusters and all that. You might not see that work, but it's still of the same flavor, Yeah, right. Tyler Stout's gig posters are the same kind of vibe as his movie posters. But if you're only following movies, you might not see those. Right. It's the same work.
So I want to take a quick pit stop before we get to your actual gallery stuff and we start talking about shows and stuff. You said something, when you guys are, your friends, you're talking and you're sharing work and you're sharing resources. That's not a thing that you hear a lot. Like you don't hear that much, at least we don't hear that much from artists. We're hearing it more and more. But it's a little surprising to the outsider of this idea of like, hey, here's how you get work from this person I'm getting work from, or here's how you get to, where I am. And maybe like, why is that important to do? Or why does it not matter to share your resources? Because a lot of people think you can't share that because then you'll lose the work. Yeah, you're going to lose your own work.
Right. That's a great point to bring up, because in the first part of my career, I never had that. I would go, to the odd get together with other illustrators that were in the business, and it was very cliquey. Yeah. Or I'd go to a party, for an illustration party, and you'd try to introduce yourself to people, and if they didn't know you, they'd be polite or whatever, but then there was never any kind of engagement. It wasn't very cooperative.
Sure.
Until I got into the pop culture scene, and then everything turned around, because I don't know why it is, but it's very communal in the pop culture scene and the horror scene, the toy scene. It's very much like when you go to MondoCon and you're walking around, you guys have all been there, you see all the artists are friends with each other. That's not just because they all happen to know Mondo. It's because anybody in that scene knows each other and runs into each other.
Yeah.
It's why you can have a show like what you're having in LA coming up, the Quattro show with Matt Tobin and New Flesh and Vance Kelly and James Davis, right?
Yeah.
James Green Davis. Because those guys were friendly. Those type of people were friendly anyway. I mean, I'm on a Slack channel with a dozen guys that in the scene from all different companies, but we share. Oh, talk to this guy, this company. Oh, you want to do album covers? Oh, you should talk to my friend here. This is what they're asking for. Oh, you want to do a 59 Parks print? Talk to JP and do this. And this is how you use this screen printer. Don't use this guy. This guy's always busy, but this guy's better, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Something about the scene, both horror specifically, because that's kind of like a sub scene within it, and pop culture are so communal and so friendly, and they share because it's so style based, where you get hired specifically for your style and not just because you can fill a need, like, oh yeah, he's good enough to advertise this, this, I don't know, this Twinkie or this ice cream or whatever, but this guy's okay too, and this guy's okay too, but let's get the budgets in and see which guy's the cheapest or which guy, you know what I mean? Like, there's none, it's so much based on, we have to get this guy because he's the exact style that we want, or this girl or whatever, they're the exact style that we want. I'm not going to get a job that somebody wants to hire Tegan White for.
Yeah, sure. Right.
And Tyler Stout's not going to get a job that, maybe Ollie Moss would get. Something like that. It's like very specific. Yeah. Oh, we got to go for this person. So we're not worried about losing jobs to anybody, because we wouldn't have gotten it anyway, because we're kind of different enough. And there's almost a desire to be as different from your influence as you can. There are some people that, ape Stout or ape Moss or, some of the bigger guys in the scene, because that's popular, I think, and I like it, I'll do that.
Sure.
But there's such a backlash with collectors that kind of attitude, I find, gets weeded out really quickly, because they want different. Yeah. So we don't want you to not work. We just want you to be different. So it forces people to be as unique as possible.
So I think that's a perfect segue into what we've spent the last 20 minutes talking about your work, but we haven't, for the people who don't know your work or don't recognize your name tied to your work, we haven't really described what your work is. So talking about the uniqueness of it, your work is very, you can kind of recognize it in the sense that it feels very vibrant. You use very defined colors. At the same time, though, it's very real. I mean, it's centered in the world of realism. Likenesses, you do great portraits like nobody else. You capture color and composition of faces and the light, even the lighting. So if you think about kind of a fine artist, you bring the pop culture vibe to fine art, and everything you do is by hand, right? Like everything is
yes and no. Everything. How did I describe this? Everything that is a painting is by hand. Everything that is but my screen prints are a mix of hand and digital.
Okay.
So my giclées would be by hand. If I print in a giclée, it's because it's a hand done painting. I don't really paint from scratch digitally, because I like to have a physical painting to sell.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but if it's a screen print, it's a mix of traditional and digital.
Everything you do has kind of this real but also hyper real feel to it because of your use of color and lighting, and it's very dynamic in terms of how you do stuff. But what you've kind of become known for, at least in recent past, is really focusing on one key part of the body, and that's the eyes. Right. So we have a couple of our patrons in our Slack channel who have they had the question, why the eyes? What is it about the eyes that has drawn you, pardon the pun, has drawn you to it?
Well, there's a couple reasons. Probably the most important is that the eyes are always the hardest thing to get right I love doing likenesses. I love doing pop culture characters, specifically likenesses. And meaning not just kind of the DeLorean from Back to the Future, but just the people specifically. I like the characters. I like the expression. Because I was trained in editorial and advertising illustration, I love emotive characters. Characters that have some kind of they're telling a story with how they're posed or their expression or their hands or whatever. And that's kind of what I was trained to do. In communication and design, we were taught to express a story with an illustration in order to sell something. Essentially, it's commercial art. Like this is a character and he wants you to buy this thing or wants you to feel this way or whatever. So I was always drawn to the character part, and I grew up with Mad Magazine and movie posters and that sort of thing, and I always wanted to be Robert McGinnis or Drew Struzan or Tim and Greg Hildebrandt, that sort of thing. And those guys always relied on capturing a likeness. And it's kind of like how a musician or an athlete would want to do something because it's the hardest thing to do. It's like, I'm going to work towards this thing because it's the hardest thing, and everybody's agreed that this is the most difficult thing in art. So that's the goal, is to do that as a challenge to myself.
Sure.
Right? So it's not to be above anybody else, just kind of, I want to reach a goal myself. It's like, I want to be able to draw a picture of, Arnold Schwarzenegger and have it look like him, and have, when you show it to people, don't say, is that supposed to be?
Right.
It's like, oh, that's a great Arnold Schwarzenegger or whoever, right? So I was always drawn to that. And I was thinking up an idea for a new pop culture themed show, because, all my shows up to this point have been related to, pop culture, and I love pop surreal movement and anything kind of based in things that we kind of all have some visual touchstones that we can all relate to.
A general connection.
Sure. It's just what I'm drawn to. It's not because it's a popular thing and I can make money off of it, but I've always wanted to do those type of shows. I used to get Juxtaposed magazine and High Fructose, and I always love those little injections of, oh, that's Mickey Mouse, or that's Fred Flintstone, in a modern setting, or whatever kind of thing going on. Anyway, I digress. So I was thinking up an idea for my new pop culture show, and I thought, well, what could I do that was the bare essentials of that character and still capture their likeness? And we're just spitballing some ideas, and I thought, well, what if I just kind of did a highlight of their eyes? Would that be enough information if I just took it down to, because you've seen the series before, they've done them a very graphic series before where it's just famous hands. You've got Spider-Man's glove, or Freddy Krueger's hand, or Wolverine's claws, or whatever. It's just kind of like that one costume detail that reminds you of that character,
right?
But I wanted to do it with the eyes, which would be very specific to in a lot of the cases, the actor or the personality portraying that character. So it's like, that's not just generically a monster. It's, oh, that's Sean Connery's James Bond.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the portraits ended up being monsters or robots or whatever, and it's not, it's basically a costume. But in a lot of the cases, it's a very specific person. Like, I want to mention some from the last show, one of the Batmen. The Batman, can you call him that? Yeah. Like a very specific Batman, or Jack Nicholson's Joker, or Norman Bates. Very specific. Okay, it's that character portrayed by that actor. Definitely, that's his eyes. I can tell, and also it captures an emotion. Maybe I've got some interesting lighting or some colored lighting. So in a very small 1-to-1 scale drawing, the size of looking through, like a little mailbox, or looking through one of those doors into an exclusive club, one of those little slots, like eye slits. Can I capture not only a likeness, but an emotion, a mood, a tone, and make it interesting? And make it something that somebody's going to want to buy.
Do you just finish one of these sometime and just go like, man, I just effing nailed this. Like,
I thought you were going to ask the opposite. Yes, more. Sometimes, I mean, that's the rare occasion that I really love it from the beginning, because usually I'm thinking, I should have done this, or I should have made that more expressive, or I don't know if it quite looks like him, and I struggle with it a lot. But there's every now and then there's one that it doesn't work out. I get it 90%, and I look at it and I think, this is just not going to translate. Nobody's going to get this, or it's not interesting. There's not enough going on, and I'll actually scrap it, or I'll paint over it. So the show that you're going to see on the 9th at Mondo is actually been edited. I've cut out some ones that just weren't working, because I've even finished a few of them, and they're not really singing like they should.
Okay.
This is going to be an edit. It'll be an edited show, but I'm hoping that it's going to be a nice tight. It's a big show, but I'm hoping it's nice and tight. And I kind of called it to the best of the ones that I've done.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So,
Well, okay. So we are going to transition to final questions, because we are taking a ton of your time, and I feel like you would give us all the time we needed, but we don't want to do that. You're awesome to talk to.
I hope I'm not rambling too much.
Dude, it's been great.
I literally could just listen to you ramble for another 2 hours.
We could do this all night,
that's
but
not utilizing
that's not
your
fair.
time very well.
So before we started, we talked about like everything else that's not you in art, and you mentioned video games. So my final question is, what games are you playing, and what kind of games do you like?
Okay. I love video games. I don't do sports.
Okay.
I don't sports.
No sports.
So specifically, I don't like sports, and I don't like multiplayer games.
Okay.
Because the way I play, I end up playing for 45 minutes at lunch, or I play for, an hour before I go to bed or something. And it's always kind of weird times.
It's on your time.
I can't always guarantee that I'm going to be available for group play.
Yep.
So even though I have a bunch of friends that also have PlayStations, that we can play Destiny together or something like that, I know I can never align my schedule with them.
Sure.
So I prefer to play action games that have a strong single player campaign to it.
Yeah.
So right now, I love Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes.
It's one of the best games I've ever played.
Yep.
But games like, I like the Tomb Raider, like the modern Tomb Raider games, Uncharted, and Last of Us. Those probably give you an idea of like my favorite type of games. I'm really looking forward to, what's the zombie game that's coming out?
Oh yeah.
You know what you're talking about? Is it? Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Where the guy's a biker.
Yeah. Yep.
It's coming out in like Q2 of this year.
Yeah.
But games like that, first or third person action games, and the Dying Light.
Days Gone.
Days Gone. Yeah.
I gotcha.
That game looks amazing, and Dying Light and the follow up DLC were amazing.
Yeah.
But I just love the aspect of the exploration.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys play for the same reason. I love walking into a world and what's around that corner?
Yeah.
And, I forget what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
I know somebody's in peril that I have to get them to. have to get to them immediately. But
I have to lift this rock first.
Yeah, this rock. Yeah, what is this? I think I'll make a fire. Or I don't have a. I heard you guys talking about the Zelda game, and I've never owned a Nintendo of any kind.
Sure.
And I was actually considering buying the new. The Switch just for Zelda.
It's incredible.
You would lose yourself in Zelda Breath of the Wild.
I spent, no joke, like the other day, I spent 45 minutes cooking.
Yeah.
Like it's so good. It's just good.
That's a wow too, though.
I'm just imagining while his kids are upstairs going,
Like,
Dad, we're so hungry.
Can we eat dinner? No, for sure.
I'm working on it.
So you like, you like stuff with monsters still, some stuff with monsters still, and more cinematic experiences with big worlds you can explore. I love it. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's great. I too like playing games where it's just me.
Yeah.
But that's because I get anxiety about disappointing other people.
It's good that he does
totally
the
a
show
thing.
with thousands of downloads each week.
No. I just like the thought of like
He
being.
has to pretend like that doesn't exist. This is just for us right now.
Right.
It's too much pressure to like upset some 12-year-old on the other side of the country.
Right.
I can't handle it.
Well, getting cussed at by a 12-year-old just hurts all the time.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's a hit that my psyche can't take right now. So I just single player. That's it. So I'll go ahead and jump in. My question. So you mentioned being the desire for people to be different. That being said, at least in I'm going to say the MondoCon scene because that's the last setting I saw you in.
Yeah.
You're kind of wildly different than other people. I mean, so Andrew asked before the show started if you ever referred to yourself as like a fine artist, and I know you said no. But when I see your work, that's kind of what I thought initially. Like I have to believe that there's a very large amount of time that's invested in each one of these pieces, but not to mention a lot of training and a lot of practice just to get you to the point you are. I mean, I don't think someone's going to sit down and like 2 years later they're producing Jason Edmiston stuff. You know, that's just not the case. So being in a space where either from maybe the technical know-how that you have to have, or like the complexity of the piece, or maybe the time invested, what is it like maybe being one of the few people in the space that do what you do? Is that something that you see as a big value add for you? Or on the flip side, because your work can command more money because it's not just because of who you are, but also the amount of time, technical ability, all that stuff to produce it. Does it actually hurt you that you have to convince someone that my things cost more than other people's, prints or whatever?
No, I don't think there's really a negative to it, just because I think the collector base kind of can see. I mean, just from judging the chatter I follow the boards or whatever. I can see that people are aware that something that's hand done and you have an original is going to be more expensive.
Sure.
Like an ink drawing from Horky, you see it in person and you can see the man hours that were put into it.
Right.
And I would say the opposite is true, that you can't see the 60 hours that went into a Dan Danger piece. I mean, I'm aware of it, but the average person can't necessarily see it because they just see the end result, and and they can't see the lines forming kind of in person like you can with an original. Something about the physical medium, and you can actually see the brush strokes or the tooth of the paper or whatever. It seems like you can kind of say, oh, that would definitely take many, many hours to do. And sometimes it doesn't translate as well in digital. I wouldn't say all the time, but sometimes it's harder to translate. I think it helps me greatly that I'm one of the few quote unquote painters or in that kind of vein of fine art painters in the scene, but I'm not rare for the world of art or the world of illustration. I'm just kind of rare for the pop culture scene, I think, because everybody's, and I'll get back to, we'll circle it around to what I started talking about at the beginning, is that most of the artists that are popular that are working today are 10 years or more younger than me. So they grew up drawing on tablets and not having originals to sell. They're all computer all the time.
Yep.
So although I'm older and kind of got into the scene later than them, I kind of have that pedigree behind me that not a lot of people in the scene are doing what I'm doing. So it kind of makes me special in that respect. Only because I'm one of a few.
Sure.
But in the world of illustration and where I came from originally, say doing editorial illustrations or advertising or whatever, that was the majority, because most of the artists that are big in that market, like say Tim O'Brien or Roberto Parada or Anita Kuntz, Mark Fredrickson, who does all the covers for Mad Magazine,
right,
who's now digital, but it used to be, all these artists used to be at least traditional artists. So they all have physical art, and that's what I grew up on. Even the Hildebrandt brothers. Well, I guess Greg is the only one still around, or say Boris Vallejo or Alex Ross. Like these guys are either my age or older, so they're traditional artists for the most part. So it really is kind of like I'm at that breaking point between technologies. So I think I'm lucky in that respect.
Sure.
But I think people see value in it. And I'm also able to have a digital career where I'm able to sell prints, and a physical career where I am able to have gallery shows and have physical art to sell, which I love that, because I always wanted to do that when I was
that's, again,
coming up.
Perfect segue into what I want to ask as my final question, which will lead us to really what we all came to hear about, which is the show that's coming up tomorrow if you're listening to this on release day.
Thanks, guys.
But you talk about self-promotion. You talk about the idea of kind of putting yourself out there in as many channels as possible. But you also you've kind of mastered the idea of multiple what's the word I'm looking for? Like you have made a system of efficiency in terms of making a gateway for people to get your work. So everything from a $25 print to an original sketch, like the sketch that print started with,
right,
to the original painting, you have made price points for every collector at every level to get into your work, which is, from a business perspective, it's a masterful idea. And so what is it about that, even to the point where you're selling prints and you do remarks on some of these prints,
right,
which make them also a one of a kind, and they're your original. What is the drive behind that? Who told you to do that? Because it's genius.
Thank you. It's by no means is any of that original. Maybe I'm just unusual in the scene for that, but I kind of just pulled, the things that I like from other artists that are also doing it. I mean, yeah. I'm sure James Jean does that, or you see comic book artists do that too, where they'll sell the pencils and then they'll also sell the inks, and they'll sell signed comics, or they'll do remarks on the comic covers. So because I have a kind of exposure in that comic book collecting market as well. I mean, I grew up on comic books, and I've been to San Diego Comic-Con every year for the last, 12 years or something, either as an exhibitor.
You're a veteran.
I've never once paid for San Diego Comic-Con. That is my goal, to die without ever paying.
What?
If they stop inviting me, I stop going.
That's amazing.
I've always gone as a pro.
Yeah.
And then I got a table. And then I've never stopped getting a table. So I've actually never paid, and I've always been to every day at Comic-Con.
Yeah, but I mean, paying for a table is, that's not cheap.
That's the entrance fee right there.
You're working it. You're working it. It's not like you're just going and hanging out.
That's the unfortunate part. I can't leave my 10 by 10 booth, but none of that stuff is by any means new, but Rob Jones likes to say I don't like leaving any money on, probably because I said those exact words to him once. But I look at it as I made the art and somebody wants to buy it. Why don't I sell that thing? Yeah. So I've even sold thumbnail sketches before. I've literally sold a thumbnail sketch for my Halloween poster. I don't know, $100 or something. It was the size of a Post-it note. You sell that.
Your thumbnail sketch is going to look better than my finished rendered drawing. So,
well, hey, I put it up for sale and somebody wanted to buy it. But you sell that. You sell the type pencils. You sell the inked versions of it, because I'll scan my pencils and I'll print them out and I'll ink those. And then you can sell the posters. And then if you do a sketch on the posters, you can sell an upgraded version of those posters. Like, there's all different price points.
Right.
And why not? I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. No. I made it. No. Yeah. It's licensed. It's fair game. I figure it's also getting my work in the hands of more collectors, which also broadens my base of collectors.
That's the smart thing for me. I think a lot of guys get to the level that you're at. I know I'm taking this beyond the question, but a lot of guys get to the level that you're at, and you are at the top. I mean, you're at a high level, right? It doesn't get a whole lot higher than that.
I'm pretty happy.
And by the time they get there, they forget the entry level collector. And you have set it up in such a way that you have remembered that there are some people who haven't yet found you. And once they have the gateway piece, eventually they'll get to a point where they're like, oh, you know what? I have enough prints. I'm ready for an original. Or I have enough sketches. I'm ready for a painting. Like that kind of idea. And I think that's so smart, and I think so many people can learn. Even some of these other guys who are at the top of their game can learn from that mindset, that you are constantly creating a gateway and an entry point for new people, and to broaden your influence and broaden your audience. I think it's super smart.
Well, here, can I interject one thing?
Yeah.
It's very timely because my wife and I will watch *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Yeah.
And there's an episode today. I won't spoil it if you guys are following, but there's an episode today where one of the characters was explaining a business model to a group of people, and they were explaining that they sell this pro version of this thing that they built to corporations for large amounts of money because they can afford it, but they give away the base model for free to the public.
Yeah.
And I turned to my wife and I said, that's what I do. It's like you essentially, that's like an Instagram model or like a Facebook model. It's you give away something or sell something for a small amount to the average person, but you can always upgrade if you want that next level. And it's kind of the entry. It's the drug dealing model. It's commerce from, it's bare basics, commerce. Get them interested at a low level and get that collecting bug going, and they'll kind of travel with you along the way, and they'll grow with you, and they'll be like, I'm doing a bit better now. I think I'm going to invest I'm going to line up and go to that next show and invest in a pencil sketch. And oh man, that was a lot of fun. I think I'm going to save up or sell a few posters. I'm going to get a painting next time, a small painting, $100 or whatever, and kind of work your way through the collecting base. I used to collect dollar store figures, dollar store GoBot knockoffs. GoBots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys know GoBots. Dollar store GoBot knockoffs.
Yeah.
Then I bought the licensed ones for Hasbro. And then you get into the sideshow collectibles that are like $300 each. Or you can go to 3.0 and get like the $1,000 toys.
Yeah.
There's all those levels of collecting.
Yeah.
I'm a consumer of pop culture, so it's this exact same model.
Yeah, man.
It's just I'm hustling paper.
It's smart. It's super smart. So take us into to the main event. This is airing the day before the show. I'm going to be there. I'm going to see you there.
Awesome. Great.
But
you're going to be dressed to the nines.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't get to talk about. But that you'll be looking way better than everybody else in there. Everyone else will be sweaty from waiting in line for a week.
That's right. That's right.
But the Eyes Without a Face 2 show. So it's like the sequel. We talked to Rob Jones at the last show a couple weeks ago, and he kind of hinted that there's 99, that there might not quite be 100 because there's
just shy of 100. Yeah, I think speaking to cutting some of the ones that weren't quite making the cut. I want this show to be tight, so I'd rather have close to 100 really good ones than 100 just to say hit that number.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I do like to set a goal for myself, because if I don't, I would have quit weeks ago. I'm exhausted. At the time of this recording, I've still got a few more to do, so I'll be working all weekend to get these done, and then that's it.
We were joking that maybe some of the paint would still be drying when they were opening.
they might.
So give everybody a peek behind the curtain. So knowing that this is going to air right before the show airs, give people an idea what they can expect to see from the show. Let people know that they need to make it out to Austin. They still have time by the time this episode airs to get there. Let us know what this show is going to look like.
All right. Well, I'll be in attendance. There's going to be nearing 100 new paintings, and all the corresponding, plus a few extra pencil sketches for all of those paintings.
Nice.
So there's going to be almost 200 pieces in the show, including the absolute largest thing that I ever painted. And I used to work for a mural company.
Whoa.
I didn't mention back in the day. But I would do huge murals for restaurants. And this is bigger than anything that I ever painted professionally for that company.
And it's still just the eyes, right?
Just the eyes. It's 8.5 feet tall, and it's 22 feet long.
What?
That's big. Are we going to have to open another?
Does it fit?
That's larger than Mondo.
Yeah.
It's as big as their largest wall.
Wow.
You can imagine if you're facing the cache, the wall on the left is their largest wall.
Okay.
It takes up the entire wall. Plus a few other large ones. Also, and for people that aren't aware of what the show is about, it's just a 1-to-1 scale close crop of eyes from all over pop culture and, art and music and movies and TV and cartoons, everything. And by 1-to-1, I mean, if it's a human, it's human size. It would be the same size as you standing in front of it. And it looks like looking through a mail slot, like about that, a 1:3 ratio. At my last show, I had a Bruce from Jaws, the shark, and it was shark size, and it was, like the size of a door. So everything is 1-to-1 size, monsters and robots and cartoon characters. They're all new. They're all different from the last show. And also in attendance will be my parents and my wife. And if you guys have been following my screen print career at all, my father and my wife have oftentimes been models for some of my posters.
Yeah.
So Hateful Eight specifically, all the men are my dad, unless they're just straight, screen grabs or promotional pictures that I've culled together. Daisy is my wife. I had gotten costumes at a costume shop and dressed them up and lit them and just obviously added the heads of the actors. Or my Halloween poster is my dad, posing in that way. So they'll be in attendance. If you want and you think it'd be fun, please bring any of the posters that they posed for. If you want to know which ones they are, I've listed them on my Facebook feed.
Nice.
That's so fun. You've made them like accessory celebrities in this situation that they're gonna.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think it'd be fun for them to at least to meet them. My wife's been to shows before. You probably, if you've been to a show, you probably met her at least once or twice. But my dad's never been to one of these shows, so I'm flying my parents out specifically so they can kind of experience the big Mondo Gallery show. I'm excited because they've been to some of my gallery shows in Toronto, but we don't get the crowds like we get in Austin. I mean, I'm really excited of just having them.
Awesome.
It's a big deal, stated by the fact that somebody on Mondo Trader has posted they are already lined up. I believe it's like 10 days ahead of time. I think that's a record. I think that even surpasses Comic-Con status. I mean,
it might be. He's
going to smell terrible.
Yeah.
Steven is actually a really good supporter of my art, and he's a friend, and he's actually been first in line, I think, for all of my shows. So I'm looking forward to seeing if he has some friends.
Yeah. So,
or like just Steven and I enjoying a nice gallery show by ourselves.
Rumor has it that you will be giving out prints to the first 50 people who are going to be in line. Yeah. Is that correct?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, it's a limited exclusive print edition. I've saved a few for a contest I'm having on if you don't mind on Adventures in Design with Mark. So I'm doing a promotion on his show all week. But other than that, this print is exclusive to my Eyes Without a Face 2 show. So the first 50 people in line will get that exclusive Eyes Giclée that has never been printed before. And it's a piece from the show.
Nice.
Awesome. Will there be prints? Yeah. Will there be other prints available, or is it just originals?
No, it's just originals and pencils at the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, we could not be more thrilled. I can't wait to be there to get to see this stuff firsthand. Thank you. Consequently, everybody who's watching this show on YouTube and can't make it out, we will have a recap episode with all the stuff on YouTube. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. Obviously, keep your eyes peeled to Mondo for any of the stuff that might drop after the fact if there's anything left. But Jason, holy cow!
I think Monday, the following Monday. So then, I guess the 12th.
Yeah.
The leftover pieces will be available at mondotees.com.
Nice.
That's awesome. Thank you for your extended time. I know this went a little bit longer than what we agreed on. And if you're a regular listener, this went longer than we typically go. But you have so much to offer, and we're so excited that you were able to join us.
Yeah.
We can't wait for the show. Tell everybody where they can find you and follow you and support what you're doing.
Yeah, probably the best place would be jasonedmiston.com. There's links for all my social media there. It's EDMISTON. or Jason Edmiston Art on Instagram. Probably be the best place. I try to post something every day.
Nice.
Awesome. Before we head out of here, would you be willing to draw some tokens for us so we know what we're talking about next week?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's it for the interview portion. Up next, we're going to draw some tokens. The tokens portion every week is when we get to find out exactly what our category is going to be next week, so we can pick our topics based on that category. So I've got the tokens. Jason, I'm going to put them down here. I'm going to shuffle them up in front of me. I can't see them. You can't see them. Give me a number between 1 and 3, and we'll be picking for Patrick.
3.
Patrick, you got art and design, my friend.
Okay.
All right.
That comes at a great time considering what we're doing this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. All right.
You guys, can I say before I choose the next one?
Yeah.
I've been listening a lot to your podcast, these last few months. Ever think about interjecting a wild card one in there?
So
now and then?
We have other wild card ones that
Do it
we
right
use
now.
when we go on the
Throw
road.
it in there.
Okay.
Interject a wild card.
All right, there you go. Shaking things up.
Let's see.
I'm still keeping art and design because that one's really good this week. So
That's fine.
I'm gonna shuffle these up. Give me a number.
Damn, should have said something earlier.
Give me a number between 1 and 5, and you'll be picking for Luke.
1 and 5. Okay, 4.
4. Luke, you have the sciences.
Yes.
good thing that's not broad.
So random. So good.
And then that leaves me with toys and games. So
Nice.
Congratulations, Jason,
Science.
bringing the goods all around. Holy cow!
The sciences.
Fine.
Sure, all of them.
My monkey wrench. Sorry, Luke.
No, it's all good, man.
You can find show notes and links to everything below this if you're watching it on YouTube. Otherwise, go to mofonepodcast.com. You can find an archive with so many other incredibly talented people like Jason. If you are going to be in Orlando, we're doing a meetup at the boardwalk at Disney.
The cruise.
Just find the information on Instagram because Cruise Club Lounge with incredible artists there. If you are going to be in Austin, make sure you stop out, say hi to me, say hi to Jason, get Jason's dad to sign all of your posters. And man, this is going to be a blast. We're on social media, M of One Podcast. You know all of that stuff. But just find us, subscribe, listen, like, share, follow, all the different things.
Stuff.
But for now, we're going to get out of here. I'm Andrew.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Luke.
Oh, I'm Jason.
Peace out.
Bye.
Hold on to your butts.
Always be hustling.